Hello students, this is Professor Chalai, and in this video we're going to go over some of the things you may need to know for the molecular shapes online lab. Let's get started. Now in our course so far, we talked about how we can go about figuring out the geometries around certain atoms when they're in molecules using this idea of what we call VSEPR theory, valence shell electron pair repulsion theory. And in this theory, we talked about how every sort of electron group or electron domain around an atom helps to determine the geometry that the other bonds around that atom would eventually be in. So for example, if we have carbon dioxide, a carbon dioxide molecule like this with all its lone pairs, we see that it has two different double bonds, so that it means that it has two electron groups or two electron domains. And that will help us to figure out the geometry. There are zero lone pairs, which also sort of helps us to figure out what the geometry is. To use a different example, let's say we had, I don't know, ammonia, right? Ammonia has 3 hydrogen bonds like this and a lone pair on the nitrogen, right? We know that we have 1, 2, 3, 4 electron groups, right? Each bond, regardless of whether they're single or double bond, is a single electron group or electron domain. And each lone pair is its own domain. So if you have 2 sets of lone pairs for electrons, those will be 2 different electron groups. So now in this one, we also have 1 lone pair. So this together will help us to determine what the geometry around that molecule is. Now, to help us figure out this, we're going to do what we use a simulation called the PHET simulation by following this link here. When you follow that link, it should take you to a page that looks like this. And you can load up the simulation by just clicking that button there, and it should load. Now, if you're having difficulty loading, you could try to either close your entire browser and restart your browser and then click the link. Or you could try a different browser. Many of our computers have multiple browsers installed, and so if it doesn't work for one browser, it might work for another. If you're still having difficulties using it, just ask your instructor. But once you've loaded it up, you'll have 2 different options. The model options that sort of just uses fake molecules with fake symbols, but gives you a general sort of idealized situation of what the bond angles and stuff would look like. And then there's a real molecule part of it that gives you some real bond angles for some real molecules. Here you see that it's for water. So for example, if you click on the model system, you'll just load up this little page right here. I would just click molecular geometry and electron geometry to show you what they are. The molecule geometry shows you the geometry for the bonds only, accounting for the lone pairs, but you know, it's a geometry of the molecule. Whereas the electron geometry gives you the geometry around that central atom that includes the lone pairs. I would also click that just to show the bond angles so that, so that we have that. Note that if you try to click on an atom and move it to change the bond angle and you let it go, it will go back to where it was. That's because these 2 bonds, or rather the electron domains for these 2 bonds here, are trying to repel each other, and the only way that they could do so successfully or efficiently is when they're completely opposite sides of the central atom. All right, if you wanted to add more bonds to here, you just click on one of these. If you wanted to add a single bond, you click on a single bond. You want to add a double bond, you click on a double bond. You want to add a triple bond, you click on a triple bond. You want to add a lone pair, you click on a lone pair. If you want to remove all of them, you click remove all. You could add multiple lone pairs or multiple bonds. If you wanted to remove one type of bond, you just click the X once. One of those bonds are removed. You want to remove a lone pair, you click on it once. One of the lone pairs removed, the other one still remains. So we're going to use this to explore different types of molecular geometries following the instructions on your lab handout. All of the instructions should be self-explanatory. If something seems confusing, please ask your instructor. Now, the other thing I wanted to talk about was this idea of representing molecules on a page, because usually when we're looking at things, we don't have a nice fancy simulations like this so that we can scroll around with and see the geometry of the molecule, for example. what we would see is molecule drawn on a page, either by you or in a PDF or something like that. And so we need a way to represent the three-dimensional geometry of a molecule. And so one of the ways that we have sort of we came up with to do that is by using these sort of different types of lines. So if I'm just using a single line like this, like I've used here or here, it just means that those bonds are sort of flat with the page, right? So for example, here, if I rotate this such that these bonds are sort of flat or along the plane of the screen, that's what these bonds are representing. If I do this triangle bond here, that's solidly filled, so it's a triangle that starts with the tip at the carbon and then extends out. Let me just exaggerate it. Let's use this color to exaggerate it with a big triangle, kind of like this with filled colors. It means that whatever this atom is at the broader end of the triangle is sticking out of the page. So let me see if let's put 4 bonds on this. So what this is representing is, let me see if I can align it properly, something like this, right? What we have is the bond that goes to the left here and downwards, more or less, are along the same line, the same plane as the mid-center atom. This one that sticks out on top is like the fluorine here. It sticks sort of towards you, out from the page. And then chlorine, in this example, using these dashed triangle lines, is sticking sort of behind the plane of the page. All right, so that's how we use to represent atoms in three-dimensional atoms on a two-dimensional page. We use these sort of triangles, either filled triangles or sort of dashed line triangles. And this means that something's sticking out of the page and something's going behind the page. Behind. There we go. So we're going to use that to sort of explore various different geometries. For example, let's look at the case where we have 5 different bonds or electron domains around the central atom. Well, let's do that. Let's make 5 bonds, right? This is what that atom looks like, but how do we represent this on a two-dimensional page? Well, first you would want to rotate it such that you have as many atoms as you can that are in line with the screen, because that's the easiest way to represent it, and in a way that you can more or less see all of the atoms that are involved. So here is an example of, I can see 1, 2, 3, 4 atoms here are in line with the page, and then these 2 atoms, one is sticking behind, one is sticking in front. So I'm gonna stick with this layout. So if I were to draw this using this representation here, what would that look like? I'm gonna use open circle for the center atom and closed circles for the end atoms. And so what we'll have is open circle for the center atom. We have a T shape that are all in line with the page. So 1, 2, 3. These are all in line with the page, so that's okay. And then the one here is sticking behind, so I'll draw that using these dashed line that we talked about. And here's that atom. And then this atom is sticking out from the page towards me, so I'm going to use the filled triangle to represent this atom. And that's it. That's how we can take a three-dimensional representation of a molecule and draw it on a two-dimensional page, but it still sort of gives us an idea of what the 3D molecule looks like. So if you have questions about how to draw that for more complex molecules, you can also ask your instructor. And then towards the, where are we? Towards the end of the lab, you'll be asked to compare the model atoms that is on this page here to real molecules. And so when you want to go look at the values for the real molecule, simply click over here. It'll show you the values for the real molecule. You can click on the molecular geometry and the electron geometries, and maybe even bond angles if you want to see all that. And then you just sort of choose what real molecule you are interested in. So here is BF3, and if you want to quickly switch over to what a model system would look like, you just click on model here. In the model system, this is what you get. So that's all that I wanted to touch on for this pre-lab. If you have questions, please reach out to your instructor. Otherwise, yeah, have fun with this lab.